There are some things that seem to us to really embody the Victorian style, and on Flog we see quite a few fancy epergnes and centrepieces and other highly decorative ornaments. But do these things really reflect the way the Victorians lived during the latter part of the 19th century? Well, David Fletcher went to find out. We all know what rows and rows of Victorian houses look like from the outside. But do we know how people really furnished and lived in them? The Panacea Museum in David's hometown of Bedford is a house that's a time capsule of the period and which offers a snapshot of one family's life there.
Hello, David.
Hi, Gemma. Good to see you again.
Good.
Every time I come to this house, I marvel at this encaustic tile floor here.
Yes, it is.
And, of course, the arch.
Our very grand arch.
I mean, it's a modest house, but a most amazing arch. It's a real eye-catcher, isn't it?
It is a real eye-catcher, and that's just a taste of what's to come inside. Come on,
Jolly good.
David.
Lead on. Now, Gemma, I've been to this house 2 or 3 times before, and one of the things I love most about it is it enables us to put Victorian furniture, Victorian objects in a context. Now, this table here, I've sold hundreds of these in my time, but I don't think I've ever actually seen one in its context.
Yes, that's right. We've got this wonderful table, which it is good to see in context. We've also got, a piano, a typical asset of a Victorian house, which the children would have used, and a writing desk, which perhaps would have been used by the gentleman of the house.
What sort of family were they?
We've got some wonderful photos of the Baltrop family living in this house. They were a fairly typical, conservative, educated, and I would say broadly middle-class family. Arthur Baltrop was a priest. They had 4 children, 3 sons and a daughter. Also, Mabel Baltrop's elderly aunts lived with them, which wasn't uncommon. They would have had between 1 and 3 servants, we're not sure, but certainly some help. The children attended the local Bedford schools. Mabel was involved in her husband's work in the church, and she did a lot of charity work as well. And she would have wanted people to come in to see her home, to see her place perhaps in society.
I've been doing a little bit of homework, and there's a fascinating book written by a lady called Mrs. Panton in the 1860s, 1870s, I think. And she was, if you like, the mother of interior design. And she famously said that the lady of the house, if she had time to go shopping because her husband was working, shouldn't be so concerned with buying anything that was fashionable, but buying things that reflected her husband's status. And we see that here. Where do you think these Japanese vases might have been bought?
These could have been a considered purchase, perhaps, by the lady of the house. I think to furnish the house in a particular style, it was quite aspirational, but this would have been perhaps not from Bedford local, maybe a day trip to London, a little luxury, a treat for the woman of the house. And many of the possessions in this room would have either been a sort of aspirational purchase or perhaps a gift from someone's travels. So the Victorians, yes, a real eclectic mix. But next door, where the Baltrops would have done their entertaining, we've got some far more impressive furniture to have a look at. So if you'd like to lead the way.
I'll lead on.
Thank you.
Home was very important to Victorians. They defined spaces within their homes. There were public spaces, private spaces, shared spaces. Some rooms only had one purpose, other rooms had more than one purpose. It's quite a complex thing, really, but the home was definitely very important in the average Victorian middle-class person's life. This is obviously the dining room. And this is a public room.
Very much a public room. This would have been a space for entertaining, and your guests would have been in here for quite a while to sit down for a meal. And I think it's noticeable that the furniture in here is grander than in the rest of the house. And I think there is an element of showing off in that, really, that this is what they wanted people to see.
Talking about showing off, I love this overmantel arrangement here.
Yes.
3 tiers of shelves, it just goes on and on and on. And certainly I know the Victorians used to think that if your overmantel was wider than it was high, it was rather coarse. If it was higher than it was wide, it was very grand.
That would have been a ceiling height. So, in this room and in the other front room, we have much higher ceilings than in the rest of the house. And yeah, these are the rooms you would have entertained in. You would have wanted a higher, grander ceiling. And obviously, if you have a high ceiling, you've got room to build up your
So it wasn't an issue of taste, really, so much as an issue of having the money to afford a house with higher ground floor ceiling heights.
What's interesting is that this house, although not terribly affluent and grand, might have had some features which an older, grander house might not have had. So upstairs plumbing you could have found in a fairly modest house like this, but not in a grand house built 20 years before.
And getting down to the nitty-gritty, a loo that flushed.
Yes, exactly.
And was indoors
something to
too.
show off to your guests.
While ordinary Victorians were busy keeping up appearances, there was a tiny section of high society who could really flirt with their own fancies.